All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another office hours event. The one that we are doing usually on, well, it should be on a bi weekly basis, but sometimes we have unexpected things. Some things are being a bit delayed, but again, we are here. We are here to answer your questions, to give you some updates on about Novu, about how everything is doing, and to answer your questions, of course. So, Dima, hi, how you doing?
Doing good, doing good. Good to be back. Good.
Yeah, exactly. So let's start as usual with everyone who is currently watching the live stream. Please write down in the chat where are you joining us from and what is the time there for you. I know that for me and Dima, the time is 3 p.m. as usual, but sometimes Dima is a bit of a traveler. So, but yeah, right now we're still in the usual time zone. So yeah, it's 3 p.m. for us. Do we have okay, we have a good morning from Mark. We have Santosh here, uh, Coast East. Yeah, 8 a.m. All right. Amazing. So we hope that we getting you in your morning coffee or something. But it's still a great joy that you are joining us. We have Michael. We have David from Sweden, 1402. Yes. Hello, David. We have Dimitri, same 3 p.m. Nice. Okay, good. So, Dima, I know that like briefly before we started this live session, we have not released the release notes for the recent release, the 0.17. But either way, the release is actually already in production. Am I right?
Yes, yes, it
And
is.
yes, and I think that we all can expect the release notes to be out and published in our GitHub repo sometime during this week to for those who wants to go in a bit more depth. So Dima, what's got you excited so far this week and with this release?
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the we are kind of tackling, a few key areas, and we've touched it a bit on the previous, kind of on the pre-section of the previous office hours we had. So we are working currently and focusing on a couple areas. The first one is around the integration store, and kind of we did a bit of a relayout, restructuring a bit how we are handling the integration store, some confusion regarding the environment. So we kind of try to simplify it and put it kind of in a single place where you can see, your dev and prod kind of available environments that are accessible to you. So you can see them in a single location, what is missing, what is not available. And the other thing is connected with the integration store is basically the ability to have more than one active provider available to you. So in some cases where you want to have a specific provider that will be triggered for a specific workflow or specific tenant or a specific subscriber, or all of the above, or just in some cases where you have the logic on your backend and you would love to specify which of the providers you would love to trigger and when. It might be the load balancing, it might be kind of fail-safe mechanism, it might be uh, cost optimization for specific subscribers that might be in a specific geographical area where SMS messages might be more expensive than other ones. So previously we've been really kind of forcing to have only a single provider per active channel. Um, and now we are breaking the kind of the root basis for that. We've built a system to support it from the get-go, but we haven't really supported it proactively because we had to kind of resolve a few of our infrastructure changes to support this kind of new behavior and API. So we
Mm-hmm.
are rolling out the multi-provider configuration little by little. It's still under a feature flag for us, so it's kind of in the early stages. So we are releasing it gradually for some of our users, and also for the next feature I'm going to tackle. And this is something, a practice we will be doing more and more soon. So if you're interested in getting kind of the very early bird access to some of those features, please write to Emil or to me, and we can put you kind of in our beta group. We'll soon probably do some work around it to be it a bit more official, and so people can kind of sign into the beta features and get a bit earlier access than others. Um, so
To
the
get to
integration,
the beta of the beta.
yes, and and really with the integration stores, I can share maybe my screen for a bit if Emily you can bring it up.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, so basically the new integration store is a bit changed in the layout of how it's actually looking. So we're going a bit more on a more of a streamlined provider. You can actually go and connect the different providers just as you would previously do that. One of the changes we are introducing is actually the ability to, so you specify the actual environment for this provider, so you can manage it all from a single place. Usually what was happening, people were forgetting, that they need to do a production environment, switch to this tab, the list wasn't the same. So we trying to do like a unified place where you can see all of your available integrations, to which environment they're associated, and so on. So we're bringing it a bit more on the organization level, versus the previous version. Another thing that is a bit new here, and you can notice this, is after I will create one, there is basically something called provider identifier. And with this provider identifier, basically what you can do is you can actually override which provider you want to use based on this identifier. We are beginning the initial rollout will be only with the trigger event. So during the event trigger, you can specify the provider ID that will be used for a given channel. But in the next version we will be releasing, we will basically providing the ability to add condition sets to when this provider should be executed. So Novo can basically have the logic of, okay, which provider should I select? It can be based on subscriber data, tenant data, it can be based on workflow data, or any other conditions in the future, even like a custom webhook call, so you can tell us which provider should we use. So this is something that is kind of one of the changes we are performing right now. We also done some changes. It's not relevant for everyone, but we've also had some changes with our built-in providers for SMS and email that we are providing for testing purposes in our cloud service. So everything will be under a single roof, and you can see it from a single place. And the next step for it is also going to be, as I mentioned, the condition support. So you can specify an automatic rule set basically for when Novu should apply a specific provider, which is really exciting.
What is the default configurations currently for the integration store for a person that kind of just introduced to Novo and the integration
Yeah.
store? What the flow will look like?
So basically, you will start with an email and SMS providers that are provided by Novu. Basically, you can send, I think it's the limit is 300 emails a month, or I think it's around 30 SMS messages, so you can test it out. The goal is, specifically when you're starting out, is that you probably evaluating, still not sure, what use case will it solve for you, and kind of trying to play around with the system. So we try to remove the friction, so you can actually go faster to testing the trigger event and actually testing the system. But again, for a more of a production grade system, obviously you will have to create your own provider, and you will do it previously as you would do. You would select the provider based on the list we allow you here, select the environment you would love to specify this for, and later on also add the conditions for this particular provider. You can leave it as default, so now we'll pick it up basically by default when sending the notifications unless otherwise specified. And so this is regarding the integration store functionality. The other are very connected, and they're kind of living in a close proximity to each other, is the new tenants management functionality. So with the new tenants management functionality, we're basically introducing a way to encapsulate specific configurations on a given tenant inside your system. So a lot of our customers are obviously multi-tenant in nature, so it can be any SaaS providers or any other tools that are available. And with multi-tenancy, basically what is possible is to create a tenant. And let's say one of your customers is named, I don't know, X, right? The new Twitter rebranding.
Yeah.
And what we allow you to do is basically specify custom JSON metadata attributes. I will later explain what you can do with that. But once you have this entity, you can start to modify parts of the Novu experience dedicated to this particular tenant. So after creating this tenant, each tenant has an identifier, obviously, and as mentioned previously, when going into the integration center in the next version, we're starting to connect this tenant's entity to different parts of the system. So the first part will be in the integration store. So you can actually go and create an integration dedicated to a tenant. So whenever you will be triggering a notification for a given tenant, it will be actually picking up the appropriate provider for this given tenant automatically for you. The other section that we are looking right now is, and I maybe let me try to, I'll try to provide maybe a sneak peek if I have the design available. So it's
Hmm.
basically controlling parts of the workflow based on a given tenant. So let's say you are an enterprise customer, enterprise SaaS, that some of your customers are big customers and they want to modify part of the Novo experience for their need. For example, they would love to do digest only for their subset of users, and let's say they want it daily or not weekly as a default, right?
Hmm.
So you could actually create those modifications. Or let's say you would love to have an exclaimer in one of your um, let's say email configurations. So you could say a specific block will be only associated to a given tenant. So today, what you would be able to do, we actually inject the tenant information uh, in the execution context. So you can send the tenant ID when you are doing the trigger, and then you can access the information you provided back in the screen. So go back for a second. So any of the custom properties of the tenant or the information, the name of the tenant and so on inside the actual template. So you can reuse basically a reusable pieces for your given tenants. Maybe it might be branding configurations, colors, or some text blocks, or it might be having a specific modification for the template. For everyone, it's going to be a specific email content, and for only one of your tenants, it's going to be a modified version of it because they needed the modifications, or you can modify it, but you still will manage it from the single location of the actual workflow. So um, here we are connecting in multiple ways, as I mentioned. So you will be allowed to actually do, I don't have this is something we are starting to work and probably will be available in the next version for us, is the ability to actually configure variants of the different nodes. So you can have a different variants of the email, and the variance is configurable. One of the ways you can assign the variance is to be on the tenant level, but you can do custom hooks and filters to say, hey, in this particular scenario, please use this variation of the email or the other one. And I'm trying to find if I'll have a quickly, I was able to find it. Um, I don't see it here. Yeah, but maybe we can show it in the next one. So basically, it's the connectivity between the different subsets. So tenants connected to workflow, connected to integration store, and so on.
Hmm. By the way, I think that you encounter many different use cases and chatting with different users and some of our clients. Do you have you encountered with any interesting use case that you think that could be worth sharing here with the community and for other people who might consider Novu?
Yeah, sure. So I think, from let's tackle maybe a bit on the integration store. And I think I mentioned this previously about, there might be some cost optimizations reasons where based on the
Right.
subscriber locale or location, you would love to use a local provider, let's
Mhm.
say in, I don't know, in Germany versus in the US versus in Israel versus somewhere in Asia. So you can actually kind of create those configurations prior hand, create the rule set, and then Novu will actually make the routing based on the
Mm-hmm.
given context of the execution. So this one is a really interesting use case. The other one is the actual ability. Let's say you have a 2FA, email or SMS, and it's using maybe a different IP pool from your email provider, and you would love a specific workflow that are critical workflows that might be more expensive for you, but you want to say that maybe the 2FA use cases will use a dedicated IP pool from your email provider, or have some subset of the configurations available there. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
IP pooling and spam policies is something very common that we've seen to kind of allow this. Um, in other cases for multi-tenants, there might be some regulatory kind of needs with providers that you would say one of your tenants required to use a European-based email provider, for example, for
Mm-hmm.
compliance needs, or maybe they're like security aware and they want to use their own AWS SES instance, while all of your other tenants can use a different subset. So it's a bit more. I wouldn't say it's like the most common thing, but for companies that are growing a bit in the actual need for this flexibility, this is becoming a bottleneck. And again, for us, because we separate the concerns between the workflow between the providers, it's a very kind of intuitive way for us to say, hey, you know what, you can configure the different configurations, provide the rule set of when should we execute which, and we will, like, you don't need to worry about that, and you just send us the trigger and we'll find the appropriate configuration for you. So
Mm-hmm.
this is one, I think, one interesting approach. The other one is, again, it's a very common thing for specifically SaaS products where you want to tailor your experience depending on the tenant. So let's say, as I mentioned previously, you want to have maybe for, again, a German tenant, let's say, that has a very strict GDPR rules. You might want it to use to add in your emails, for example, a specific block or a specific content that will be modified to kind of meet these regulatory needs,
Mm-hmm.
where and use maybe some of their colors, or use them as variables in a reusable way instead of always passing them, as part of the trigger. So there is really a lot of, I think, a lot of really cool scenarios. And again, as I mentioned, providing some defaults, let's say, for workflows and digest configurations, template configurations, and we will keep expanding the different connectivity between tenants, workflows, subscribers, notifications, and basically kind
Mm-hmm.
of allowing you to connect. And we sometimes we hear about very edgy use cases, and with providing enough primitive building blocks, you can kind of compose it to the way that it actually allows you to facilitate your needs. But those are kind of the top ones that I think are really cool.
Got it. And what are other exciting things and things that could be very useful that we wish to highlight in this release? Something that, of course, we probably talked about in the previous office hours, but again, something that our viewers here may not be totally aware of or not aware of yet. So,
Yeah,
are
so
there?
I think one of the really interesting stuff, and we are, if I will go to our roadmap, if you are not familiar with it yet, this is the public roadmap for Novu. So we kind of provide some of the in progress projects we have and some of the planned ones. And you can see one of the planned ones currently is the multi language notification templates, which is basically an ability to add localization to notifications, which we are doing a lot of investigation right now. We've spoken with a lot of our customers to kind of try to understand, what they are currently doing, how they manage the translation workflows internally, and we kind of starting to see this repeated pattern of, like a very similar problems that our customers are facing, and we're kind of starting to draft an initial implementation of how it should look like. What are the connectivity parts? What are we planning to integrate with third-party localization systems? Are we going to have something in-house or a combination of both? So it's a very interesting project, and the more we dig into it, the more opportunity we see there that we can actually really help um, people who have. And we spoke with companies that have 20, 30, 40 like different locales they supporting today, and it's really hard to kind of manage it all. And specifically with notification, there are other challenges when, like, okay, some messages are delivered and that's it. Some messages, like in the notification center, are long lived. Once the user can switch the language, what should he see in his notification center? So
Like, should it be translated to another language? And yeah.
yeah, so there is a lot of interesting challenges, and then where those translations are actually located, right? Obviously, a very common similar pattern is using something like I18N, which, there is a lot of tools on the market like Localize and a lot of third-party providers that allow you kind of those uh, management of the different keys, and you have maybe the translators or the QA people who will be going and inspecting those translations before
Mm-hmm.
they're pushed to production. So there are a lot of interesting use cases there, and we kind of trying to figure out a really cool way to integrate it seamlessly. So it will be a good developer experience on one hand, but on the other hand, kind of remove the complexity of managing all of those languages on the other end. So another really cool thing, and we have I think David here. This is again a very sneak peek. This is kind of incubator projects for us right now, so I'm still kind of sharing them in the early go. We are trying to evaluate a more easy way to actually compose email templates, because email templates are notoriously hard to build. Cross-platform support and client support, and it's the combination running your own manipulation. So we are David had this great idea of trying to see. I think we are routing a few third party kind of systems. One of them is a React email by the folks from Recent, which doing an amazing job at actually allowing you to use React kind of syntax when composing an email, which I think is really cool, because you can provide this kind of cross
Wow.
functionality, and you can run your own custom functions and not rely on handlebars, or
Nice.
something like this to actually compose that. It can also allow us to use things like even Tailwind, or create, your own component libraries
Mm-hmm.
you can reuse in different areas. So there is this one. There is, I think, also Mail-in, which I think they're doing a fantastic job. So we're kind of trying to find a way to allow the flexibility to, kind of choose
The flexibility of the design in particular, or
the design, but not only. It's also the actual composing of the email, how it will look like, specifically what complex things like they digest, where maybe you want some complex items,
yeah.
let's say a table or a graph or something like this. Um, and a lot of those things is something that, we are thinking, how can we improve the developer experience around it? Because again, working with HTML templates natively is very hard, and we've seen this. And looking at this is like, what can we do with this? And this is where we are trying to experiment with a few different ideas, and hopefully soon we will be able to share like some of the progress around that, and how it's going to be connected. And so there are a few questions to answer that. And so this is about kind of the email constructs, and again, this is also connected to localization, and you can use maybe the existing libraries you might be already familiar with localization, like I18 and Next, for example. So there's a lot of really cool possibilities, when looking at this and kind of what we can do with it. So stay tuned, and hopefully we'll be able to share some more cool information about that.
We have Dimitri in the chat, also excited about React email.
Yes, yes, yes. There are really a few really cool libraries out there. I think there is the folks from Mailing, and the folks from even Mailgun with MJML. So again, we would love maybe to do something that would be, flexible enough so you can kind of plug in your own system as an extendable way, and we can provide even community kind of ability to expand the different ways you can compose emails with. So um, this is kind of some of the things that we are, trying to find creative ways of how you can actually do that.
Mhm.
So worth keeping an eye on it.
All right. So before we come to the section where we will answer and address different questions from the audience and our viewers, could you again maybe slightly touch and discuss the upcoming like the next release, which is the 0.18, what is in plan, what is in store, maybe what are the challenges that you hope to overcome
Yeah,
in this
so
cycle?
I think we mentioned this previously in the conversation. We're basically focusing more around the connectivity of tenants and the different aspects of the system. So one of those will be something we call the workflow variants, is basically providing you the ability to create variants on the step level. So you can still have a single workflow. Previously, we've seen people doing that manually by just applying filters, duplicating the email node and doing a bit different filters, which, in the end, we saw some use cases with like 50 nodes, and it was like very hard to maintain. So we trying to allow basically to create a bit more simplified way of managing variants of a single email, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
You could use it to hack it also for localization in one case or the other, because you can say, okay, this is the English variant, this is the Spanish variant, and then you can provide the conditions when each one will be applied.
Mm-hmm.
The goal with this, we will provide like the localization specifically will be a bit more integrated inside Novu, but really the point behind the variants functionality is to give you the building blocks so you can have the flexibility of actually doing something that is solving a lot of use cases by combining it with different parts of the system. So this one, and really finalizing the integration store functionality that I mentioned, adding the conditions aspect to it, so you can apply custom rules for not only when to apply a specific workflow variant, but also when selecting the actual provider in the integration store.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of one thread of our work. We are doing a lot of work right now on performance improvements and really the ability of Novu to handle a large amount of events. We've been recently growing quite like crazy, and we want to make sure that the system is keeping with the growing demand and keeping with the growing usage and providing a better experience for our users as well.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's interesting for anyone if like how we do it or how we maintain the ability to grow and to being able to put up with the scale. I'm not sure if it's also the scope of this particular live stream, but
Yeah, we
uh,
can actually do a bit more of a deep dive session, and I think there are interesting challenges there. And I think a lot of, if you're simple use case and you're sending a few hundreds of events, it's totally fine. But we are speaking with organizations that, dealing with really hundreds of millions of events. And for them, the whole challenge of somebody have to kind of manage it in one way or the other. And we're working closely to kind of making sure that Novu is actually able to grow to those directions. Again, obviously for us, our cloud infrastructure is much more complex than probably any of the people who doing the self-hosting version, because again, we are built to kind of grow and support much larger scale. So we have a bit of a deviation. It's not like we're not using the community edition Docker image for our cloud services, because we are doing some adaptations to actually facilitate higher scale when it comes to the managed service for us, and kind of a lot of the operational and DevOps kind of aspects of it, which is something that we are investing quite a lot in making sure that we can scale with the growing demand.
mhm. All right. So this is also the time where I would say to all our viewers, if you have any particular questions, something that you would like us to address during this session, please write it down right now in the chat, so we could discuss that. Maybe help the other viewers and the other community members to let them know that maybe the challenges are common or something that they could share with someone. So feel free to write it down now. Um, okay, so we have the first question right now, like in the scope of this, from Mark. Is there an upvote threshold for a feature on the roadmap site? No, I don't think so.
No, there actually should be. I think it's one per email. You can obviously hack it around, but it should be from what I remember, there should be.
It,
a
it's
limit.
it really depends on how many emails you are willing to put into the worker mark. So that would be
Yes.
our answer. We have Parcel. General question: I have to migrate from 0.9 to 0.17. Any tips? I know of the change logs.
Yeah, so Pascal, there are most of the versions don't, again, depending on the functionality you're using, you should be okay with kind of doing a gradual step version by version migration because we haven't reached kind of the 1.0 mark yet. So we are not kind of the classical Semver compatibility. Hopefully we'll reach kind of the first stable release on that. So my suggestion is kind of going either version by version. You can make jumps for most cases. Just pay attention to the breaking changes parts if it is actually relevant for you. If you're using this part of Novu, because you might not.
Yeah. All right. Another thing. We have tested an email notification that was built the way like that. It is not stable, especially. Okay, I think that it's related to the React
Yeah,
emails.
I think the challenge with email compatibility is really you have Gmail and you have Outlook and you have different and you have the Apple email clients which support different things, but I think the common thread, and you can look at it, the way I see it is something like similar to browser compatibility with CSS properties. When if you have a subset of users and you want to use a particular functionality, you can make a decision for that. So one of the things we are experimenting, and for me, it's a really interesting way to look at it, to go even in this direction, is if things like AMP emails, which I think time will tell if this technology will catch up, but I think there is a lot of potential to it to make the emails actually alive, right? So for example, like the ones you're getting from Google on Google Docs, where you can actually make an action right
Mm-hmm.
from within the email. So there is a lot of opportunities, and obviously it won't be available for email clients. You would have to think about fallbacks and so on, but it is really kind of understanding, if you want to use basic components and default structures, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's similarly, to what we're doing with some component libraries and front-end frameworks that we're using today for kind of not creating it from scratch and dealing with all of those compatibility issues, is kind of having a set. And even if you want to use something that might not be available somewhere else or not supported by, let's say, Outlook, at least you know and you can make this call, right? Because for now it's very
Yeah.
hard otherwise to know what is okay, what is not okay, and usually it's like a very tough experience.
Another question we have also from Mark. So what he meant is, do we have a threshold, like when a certain feature would get a
Uh,
particular amount of upvotes, will it be added, kind of pushed into the cycle?
the short answer is no. We kind of, the actual things that are selected, the roadmap is one input to the process of what next. Again, we are quite a small team, and we have way too much things to do than we are actually able to do that. And even with the help with a lot of the amazing community members, there's still so many things that we wish we could do, but we just don't have the time for that. So we need to prioritize. And usually the roadmap is a very crucial input to the process, but it's not the only input to the process. So it's something that we take a look at, but then eventually we will go deeper and then schedule conversations to try to understand, okay, like it was highlighted, maybe just somebody created a lot of emails for that. So it's something that we always try to speak with our users and community members before we kind of decide to go on for something. So it's we don't have a magical number.
I don't. I also wish to add that for those, and we had that already several times, where community members who wish to contribute to the project or add some additional features, the way to maybe understand where is an actual need or what could really help a lot of people, maybe really to go to the roadmap to see what was upvoted a lot of times, or what seems like a really good idea or something that you would like to work on, and pull it from there, and then of course find the issues or create the issues around that, and to work on it gradually, so it will make an impact to the overall project and the overall experience of the community and of the product. So that's also an approach. So yeah. Okay, we have another question. Is 0.17 reflected in the images?
So we are still waiting for the release notes, and we will officially tag it. The version is already available, as I mentioned in the beginning of this call, on our cloud version, and we are rolling it out gradually for some of our users. It's still under a feature flag, so I believe we just finished the actually composal of the release notes today in the morning. So hopefully we will be able to tag the version in the 1 or 2 days, something like this.
Yeah. By the way, Dima, let's just remind again, if someone wants to be in this additional, those initial stages of testing those flag features, etc., what could
It's a
this
good
individual
question.
do?
I'm thinking as we go how it tends to be done.
Yeah.
I think maybe we can sit together a bit later, maybe do some Google, like some simple form, or like some way for people to kind of, hey, I want to be part of it, and then we can also have a dedicated maybe Discord channel for kind of feedback about those features, and as things are progressing. So
Yeah.
I think we can do a bit of thinking about it, but for now you can just send a message to
The
Emil.
early adapters, yeah, everyone who wants to be in this kind of early stage stuff in the testing ground, feel free again to reach out to me, to Dima over Discord. And of course, I think that with the time and gradually we'll create some process around this. So you could just submit a request to be a part of this. And of course, we'll keep you informed and be there to collect your feedback and your thoughts to make it work a bit better, and of course to improve it over time. And this is the last question that I see currently in the comments. So if anyone has any other question, please do it now. Submit the question here in the chat so we could address that. But yeah, let's tackle this. So how can we self-host to get email, SMS replies when using Novu?
So I'll try to find the link for that. Just a second. So I'm not sure if I entirely understand the question. I'll try to to re-ask it, just Harrison, just to make sure I understand it. Do you mean like you would love to have something like the inbound reply functionality? Like if you send an email notification and the person replied to this particular notification, or you are referring just as a way to have some inbox and people can send you message to it? And in the meanwhile,
Yeah. In the meanwhile, yeah. Let's
let
Harrison, please.
we do
Yeah.
have, like, I will touch it very fast. Like, so if it's the first version, we do have in our cloud version, which is not we don't have this service available on the community edition of the inbound reply. You could still use your provider's functionality to handle that. So let's say if you're using SendGrid, they have an inbound parse service you can use and then hook it to your own service. For our cloud version, we do have a service called Inbound Reply, which is basically making this available for all of the email providers. But I'm not sure if that was your question, so I will probably get back to it. And then
Yeah.
we have Dmitry.
Dimitri.
Is it possible to filter notification by specific field in the payload? You mean in the activity feed or during the execution? So during the execution, you can apply filters to the individual steps when you're triggering it. So you can add a filter to basically say if payload property equals to something, then skip it or send it. And if you're referring to the activity feed, and the answer is no, one of the reasons we have, I think, an open issue for that. The only concern there is around the query performance, because it's not really it couldn't be actually like indexed properly. So we are experimenting with a few ideas. Again, for smaller scale, it should be okay, but we're experimenting with a few ideas of how we can make those a bit more flexible search terms. So for now, unfortunately, it is not possible in the activity feed.
Yeah, so it was about the activity feed.
Yeah.
Okay. And Harrison also replied, yes, both. Like,
Yeah. So regarding that, so for the second question you have, we don't have a support for this. I think it could be a really cool idea in the end. For the SMS specifically, I'm not sure if we can actually support that without a very good provider support, because they will actually have to get the SMS message. With email is a bit easier because we can set up some sort of an IMAP service which can receive emails and then forward them, but we don't have this available. I would actually love to hear your use case, Harrison. If you're on our Discord, please reach out to me. Maybe we can schedule a quick call. I would love to learn, what are the use cases you're trying to achieve, and maybe we can kind of add another thing to our roadmap. Or feel free to submit the feedback on the roadmap page as well.
yeah. So meanwhile, we will wait for a few more seconds to see if anyone will have. Okay, we do have another question. Wait, is it? What about filter by payload inactivity feed?
So the activity feed currently is only persisted for, yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Okay.
Period.
Yeah.
So the activity field right now is only persistent for 30 days. And basically after that, it's going to an archive. One of the things that we have, like this basic functionality, we couldn't see for now. Usually it goes by subscriber ID, workflow, or transaction ID. This is definitely something we can add. We are on a very different thread. We are started to work with some very talented person regarding improving our design system. So we actually have a bit more complex components for things like date range selector and things like this. So um, I think we need just to find a good representation of the component. If anybody wants to help with that, it's we definitely can do that. The only reason for now is just we didn't get to it yet.
If anyone will have any other question or something that they would like us to address, of course, write it in the chat. And in the short time that we have left, I also want to add that the developer experience team currently working on, let's say, on the next version of our documentation, basically to create it, to update it in all the ways that we can, that we see fit. And we also thinking about ways to make the documentation a bit more interactive and just to improve the experience of consuming those bits and bytes and the questions that you might end up with, and when you go into documentation or asking questions, so you would have a good experience of finding those answers. So if you have any good examples, something that you would like us to add, something to put emphasis on, or maybe tools to integrate into the documentation, please again reach out to me, or to Dima, or to any other team member of our core team, and just write your suggestions, so we could implement or at least consider that. It would be really helpful to improve the overall experience for everyone. All right, so I don't see that we have any other questions submitted. So I guess this is going to be a wrap for this live event. And I really want to again thank everyone who came and everyone who participated, asked questions, and been here and dedicated some of their time. So thank you all for coming. Dima, thank you for participating and addressing all those questions and sharing your particular and point of view as the one who is leading this project. I hope you had fun.
With pleasure. Thank you.
All right. So see you next time. Of course, stay updated, stay tuned in our Discord, Twitter, and make sure to just be up to date with everything that we release and gives update on. Till
Bye-bye.
next time.